Hey guys, I am Naguura, and today we're going to be talking about the new patch notes, basically the changes about the dungeons and about the raid. So I just wanted to give you my thoughts quickly about all those changes, because there were quite a few, dungeon related and raid related, so I just wanted to go over it real quick, give you a quick TLDR. So first of all, they did change the prideful affix to now have stealth detection. I think this change is aimed specifically at the MDI because we have seen teams skip the pride mob after it had spawned. So basically they spawned it, everyone was running away except the tank, and then the tank was leaping towards their team, and then everyone was shadow melting at the same second, de-aggroing the pride at, and they would just walk back and you're not in combat with it anymore. Now, they changed it now to see through invisibility or /stealth, which I personally think will not actually change the MDI skips, because they will only actually see through stealth. Like, it will only matter if you're still in aggro range, right? Because the seeing through the stealth will not actually matter if they're outside of the aggro range, because when everyone stealths at the same time, the mob will de-aggro unless the mob is too close to you that he would still be in aggro range. And I personally believe that they can skip the pride without still being in aggro range. They basically just have to have all 4 players except the tank walk really far away, and then the tank can leap, and then the priest can grip, and then they shadow melt. Because then they're also out of range and out of pull range, Which means that the pride seeing through invisibility is not actually gonna do anything because of the huge amount of distance you can cover by leaping and priest gripping. I might be wrong though, maybe it's gonna turn this skip into such a hit or miss thing that they just end up playing it. On another note, I personally also don't think that skipping the pride is actually such a bad thing for the MDI, because it creates an interesting kind of idea where one team is skipping it and the other team is playing it. And because they play it, they gain the pride buff afterwards, and it enables a really big pull they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Theoretically, right? So I like kind of looking at the difference between the teams and the different strategies that they have. But on the other hand, it's also a big issue because the only way to skip the pride is to actually play 5 night elves. And that's not actually a realistic scenario that you can see in live servers. So that's why I don't like it. And it also basically removes a bunch of classes that can't be played, right? It removes paladins, for example, shamans, warlocks, they can't be night elves. And therefore, realistically, they cannot be played on the MDI because it just removes this skippability of the pride mobs. And therefore, you have a disadvantage if you're not able to do that. So that's why I hate it and I like it at the same time. I like the skip, but I hate the fact that you need to be night elf to do it, right? So we will see on the next MDI if this is going to change anything with the skip. And if it does change anything, then maybe another solution for Blizzard would be to restrict the MDI by saying, hey, each team can only play 1 of a race, or 2 of a race at max. So you can only play 2 night elves at most, or you can only play 2 dwarfs or whatever. That would create an environment where you're unable to stack 5 of a race. So you cannot have 5 night elves, and then it removes the ability to skip the prides and use night elf as a skip. Maybe that will be the solution for the MDI, but we're gonna have to see. Anyway, this is supposed to be a patch note video and not an MDI video, so I'm going to be moving on. Let's talk about the Plaguefall changes. So they first of all nerfed Margrave's Stradama, which I think is a good thing because that boss is pretty hard. What they nerfed is that they nerfed the Plague-bound Devoted health, and damage has also been reduced by 40%. I like this change. The ads kind of felt like they're there, but they're annoying at the same time because they were incredibly hard to tank because they spawned in the intermission phase where you have the tentacles going down. So the tank can't get aggro and dodge the tentacles at the same time because they're also incredibly slow. So the ranged usually just have aggro from those ads. And when you need to dodge the tentacles, you might walk into an ad because that's the only free space. And then it melee hits you and you die, right? So I think it's good that they reduced the HP and reduced the damage to basically not make this as big of an issue anymore. Then the cast frequency of Infectious Rain has been reduced during the final phase. I also like this change because the final phase already was decently difficult, having to dodge the tentacles, plus the ads are spawning, plus the boss is casting so many infectious rains. It just seemed like a little bit too much. So I like this change too. Then they also made the plague crash slower from the tentacles, so they're now easier to dodge. I don't think that was necessary, but it's nice to have, I guess. Now, moving on to Sanguine Depths. Thankfully, there's a lot of changes to Sanguine Depths because that dungeon is really difficult. Like, that dungeon is something else. So they fixed an issue where flying chamber sentinels would fail to contribute to enemy forces. Nice, just hot fixes. Then Crix is the Voracious. Severing Smash damage reduced on all difficulties. That is awesome because Severing Smash was like the biggest issue in that fight. And also Soaking the Orbs damage has been reduced by 20%. Also great. That was a really big issue. I think the Smash was like the most difficult thing because you had a huge initial damage and then you had even more damage when you soaked those orbs. And it caused high keys to have so many issues that they ended up kiting the boss around the orbs and never soaked those orbs at all because it was like unhealable. So I like the change. Then Executed Torvald, the fleeting manifestation health reduced by 20%. I personally think they should have changed they should have reduced the damage that it does too, I think, because it's just too much damage. I think maybe they could have kept the damage the same for the manifestation. That's the ad that does pulsing AoE. But maybe they should have then lowered the amount of damage that the castigation does. That's the single target burst, like the channel on one player. I think it's just too much damage. The combination of the castigation plus that. Maybe now that the manifestation has less HP, it might be not overlapping anymore, because now you actually manage to kill the ad fast enough that the AoE from the ad plus the castigation might not be a thing. So you only get one or the other, but it's still just so much damage in my opinion that maybe they have to look at the castigation a little. That's it for Sanguine Depths. I think those changes are good and they're fine. I think there's also some hidden changes that haven't been listed. And a lot of these changes actually have already been live before the EU reset, since it is Tuesday as I'm recording this. And I was playing Dungeons today, and some of these changes actually have been live already. For example, in Necrotic Wake, if you die and you have a weapon equipped, it does not get removed anymore. That has already been live today. And I also think there was a hidden change in Sanguine Depths that the Overseers, the one that cast the chains, basically they cast a chain on all people that are close to them, and you need to run away to break the chains. That does a huge amount of damage. And I think they changed the chains to not actually apply to you if you're out of range, which was not a thing before. It would just apply to you even if you were far away, and then they instantly got removed, but it still did the initial damage, and I think they changed that now. All right, moving on, Spires of Ascension. The 3 mini-bosses in front of the last boss, they no longer trigger on death affixes like Sanguine. I think this is really good because they have a delayed death. They don't immediately die, and then it takes a while for you to get the percentage, to get all of the like affixes applied. And that just felt really weird if something like Sanguine or any other undeath affix would be applied so late. That just felt weird. And it would cause issues with bolstering too, as far as I'm aware. And they also apparently have the increased damage taken by 1% instead of 2%. So the damage increase is stacking slower, which is really good because the last mob that you played that had all 3 combinations of abilities, like the damage per second that stacks up, the damage taken that stacks up, plus the spheres, that was like a really, really hard mob always. So I really liked that they nerfed it a little by giving it less damage done. Then there's a huge amount of Necrotic Wake changes, which is interesting to me because I do think Necrotic Wake is a hard dungeon, but Sanguine Depths is harder, right? Like I think there's some other dungeons that are harder than Necrotic Wake, so it's interesting that they changed it so much. But the TLDR about this dungeon is they made your weapons that you pick up, they persist through death. So if you die, you still have the weapon afterwards, which is really great because it just did make sense that one death that happens just completely removes your ability to do a boss because you don't have a spear anymore, right? So I like that they changed that. They also kept the amount of enemies that discharged anima and the javelin hit. So the spear and the orb that does the pulsing AoE have their targets restricted to 8 now, which I think is mainly aimed at like insanely huge pulls that we've seen in the MDI, but also we've seen it on live servers too. I think this is an okay change. What people did was they would just get the orbs and then just do insanely huge pulls, gather everything up, use the orb, and just nuke it down, which, to be honest, I kind of think it's fun to do those really big pulls. But on the other hand, it also just felt like you're ignoring a lot of the trash by just AoE nuking it down. So you could argue that if so many classes have kept AoE, then maybe you also want to keep the AoE from the dungeon itself. I personally still don't think that any AoE should be kept. Either every AoE should be kept or none. Because right now we have like some kept classes and some don't, and it just like creates this like really unfair scenario, in my opinion, where some classes just can't possibly keep up with others because they have kept AoE and others don't. Hello, fire mages. Anyway, moving on. A bunch of ads damage has been reduced from the necromancers. You have these big ad packs where there's one necromancer and a bunch of ads. The same ads that also spawn on the second boss. And those ads damage has been reduced. I think this is really good because those ads were just doing insane damage, considering that they don't even give any count. Of course, they don't give count because the necromancer just kills them when he dies. But it was just like too much damage. Like one frostbolt volley goes through and you just basically wipe. That is a good change. They decreased not just the mage's damage, not just frostbolt volley and stuff, but also like the crossbowman's shoot and the warrior's damage and so on, which is really nice in my opinion. Then they reduced the HP of a bunch of necropolis ads. So in the third boss room, those mobs, collectors, harvester, vanguards, has been all reduced, which I think is really good because that room is just crazy. That was just crazy difficult. I wish they would have also reduced the damage taken by some of those mobs. It looks like they actually reduced the damage taken by the Stitchworks and by the Skeletal Monstrosity, which is nice. We'll see if it's good enough. It is a 17% melee damage reduction by the Stitchwork and 25% melee damage reduction from the Monstrosity. Hopefully that's good enough. Another big issue for this room specifically, for the Necropolis, is the fact that targeted abilities don't work. Anything that has like a target circle does not work. Vortex doesn't work. Force of Nature doesn't work. And some other abilities that need to be targeted on the floor just don't work. I'm not sure what's wrong with that platform, with the coding. There must be some issue that is like that the platform is wrongly like coded or whatever. But I hope they fix that issue because it just doesn't make sense that those abilities don't work. If the tank needs to kite and your vortex doesn't trigger and your trees don't taunt, it just feels bad. Then Blightbone carrying Worms Blood Gorge application requires trigger. Oh, okay. So basically they just nerfed the ads, the tiny little like worms from the first boss. Then Amarth, which is the second boss, reduced the range that the skeletons are being summoned. I really, really like that because sometimes you were tanking the boss and the ads were just spawning so far away that you just didn't have a chance to even like gather them up, or even after you interrupted them, they didn't walk far enough to be in melee range and then they were still at range, right? So basically just making them spawn closer, which is really good for us. Then Unholy Frenzy has been reduced. That's just the end range of the boss that usually it's being dispelled. But if you don't have someone who can dispel it, it's good that it's reduced. Then they also reduced the damage that all of the ads do during the boss spawn. So the same ads from the Necromancers, they also nerfed on the boss. Then they also increased the cast speed of the Frostbolt Volley, so it's easier to interrupt now from the mages. Then Stitch Flash, they basically reduced the duration of Embalming Ichor. I'm not 100% sure about this, but there was like the Stitchworks, when they died, they caused like a pool to spawn around their like corpse that would like have an aura and it damages you. And this might be that it's just lying there for a minute instead of 6 minutes, but I'm not 100% certain. Alright, so those are the dungeon changes. I think the dungeon changes are great. I still think there's some stuff that needs to be changed in the future, but I really, really like that Blizzard is like really on their toes, changing things as we go. Because I think this has already been like the second or the third amount of changes we have gotten for dungeons at this point, and all of them have been good. So I like it. I like all of those changes. So yeah, just keep it up. I think as I said, I still think there's some changes that need to be done, specifically related to Sanguine Depths trash. I think the bosses are now, like, it's really nice that they address the bosses. I still think some trash in that dungeon might be questionable, might need to be changed. And then also some timers. Some dungeons have such a hard timer, while other dungeons have like a super easy timer. And you literally just need to walk through, kill pack by pack, and just don't die, and you got it, right? So I think that also needs to be addressed a little. And then Theater of Pain, some mobs there do way too much damage. Like, some mobs in Theater of Pain is just like, that needs to be addressed for sure. Let's hope they change that in the future as well. Now, let's look at Castle NATHRIA changes. So first of all, lots of Stone Legion changes. I love this. Specifically, the one change they made. General Kull and General Grashal's spell cooldowns now reset with phase changes. And that is like the number one thing that is changed now that basically will make the fight a lot better. Because what was a big issue for Stone Legion, for Mythic difficulty at least, was that when you were facing the boss at a certain time, it would just like cause an issue where after the intermission phase was over. Because the boss didn't reset the cooldowns, and then it just created these really weird scenarios where you just had an ability and you couldn't, like, it literally would just wipe the raid, because this order of abilities that happened was just not working out. And then in the intermission phase, you get the crystallize, and then you wouldn't get a crystallize in the phase 2 for like forever. And you couldn't reset your bleeds depending on the boss's order of abilities that was just like created from bad timings. So I really like this. And then they also changed a bunch of other things, just like nerfs across the board for Stone Legion, reduced health for Goliath, increased the cooldown of Ravenous Frenzy, that's when the Goliath jumps on a person and that's the frontal cast. They reduced that, which is also great because on Mythic you just basically needed to use your bops, like your Paladin bop, to immune this, otherwise it would just kill the person. And they reduced the Skirmisher's health, which is also nice, I guess. They also decreased the range, and they also changed Heart Rend completely on Mythic now. If you dispel the Heart Rend, then you, as the dispeller, do not get the Heart Hemorrhage anymore. So only the person that gets dispelled gets the Heart Hemorrhage. So you don't have to do these like crazy strategies where you have a priest mass dispelling and then dying within like the Ankh Totem. You don't have to do that anymore. You can just single dispel the Heart Rends, just like you do in Heroic. It's exactly the Heroic mechanic now. It actually doesn't have a Mythic version anymore. It's just Heroic. But another thing is that in the intermission phase, you cannot outrange the Heart Rend anymore, because the Mythic strategy was to move the boss away, so the raid is out of range from the Heart Rend to basically not get this ability anymore. But they changed this now, so you will still get the Heart Rend in the mission. You still have to heal it, but it's going to be a lot easier now because of the Heart Hemorrhage not being applied to the Dispeller anymore. Then, Council of Blood. Drapel volley damage reduced by up to 20%. I don't actually even know what the Drapel volley is. I'm gonna have to be honest. But they nerfed it, so I'm sure it's great. Then, Drain Essence damage reduced by up to 20%. Okay, so that was like the single target drain that it casted on people. It's nice, I guess. They only changed it for Raid Finder, Normal, and Heroic for smaller raid sizes though. So I assume there was like some sort of scaling issue that on smaller raids, it just did too much damage in comparison to bigger raids. So this is just like a smaller raid size change. And then Dark Recital duration reduced to 6 seconds on normal and on heroic difficulty. So this Council of Blood was actually no mythic change whatsoever. This is just normal mode and heroic change. Then moving on to Sludge Fist, there's only mythic changes for this one. Sludge Fist, Colossal Roar damage reduced by 10%, Chain Slime damage reduced by 35%, and Chain Bleed damage reduced by 35%. I think that's good. That boss was doing an insane amount of damage, and it's good that it was changed a little. I think it was fine to not change like the HP of the boss, because we're getting more and more gear and more renown and whatever per week, so the damage should not be an issue anymore. But nerfing the amount of damage the boss did is good, because it really was doing like crazy damage, and you really had to like, you know, use everything you could possibly have to always survive all of this stuff. And sometimes you would even have to basically kill the person who had the chain slam, because you just weren't able to out-heal it anymore or use any cooldowns. So I like these changes for the raid as well. There's also a note underneath that says, with the Stone Legion Generals fight, in addition to slightly reducing overall difficulty, we're making changes to make it feel more consistent between attempts. That's great. This means that while certain abilities are no longer avoidable, their impact together with other abilities should be more realistic to manage, and the order in which they occur should be more reliable. Yeah, I think this is like a great change for Stone Legion. I wish they would have changed this earlier, because it caused so many issues for the progression guilds. But I assume that this was something that they didn't immediately know how to change, and then they didn't want to change it in the middle of the progression, because then some guilds would have it like harder and the other guilds had it easier. So I assume that's why they waited so long to do this change now at this point. So I guess it's still better late than never, but I hope something like this doesn't happen again in the future, because that really just created so many headaches on that boss, having these like inconsistent timers. And there are bosses that have inconsistent timers, right? But this boss in particular had like so many inconsistencies and so many like difficulties across the board that it just caused some insane overlaps that were like impossible, basically. So you had like 4 different scenarios that could happen. 2 scenarios were like manageable, and the other 2 scenarios are like completely not doable at all, or you have to like somehow miraculously survive it to manage to go through it. And that's just not how a boss should be, right? Anyway, that was my quick patch notes overview. I hope this helped you out to understand the patch notes. If you already understood the patch notes, then I hope you are interested in my opinions about them. If you have any opinions about the patch notes, do you think there's anything that shouldn't have been nerfed or shouldn't have been changed? Do you think there's other dungeons that need to be changed, need to be addressed? Also, any bosses you think in Castle NATHRIA that should be changed? Just let me know in the comments below. I would really like to hear your opinion. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you like watching videos like these. If you want me to do more commentary about patch notes and stuff in the future, just let me know. I can do stuff like this as well. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe to my channel if you like this video, and check out my stream over at twitch.tv Naguura if you want to say hi and ask any questions. And that's it. Thank you so much. Have a nice rest of your day. You're great, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye.